everyone, and welcome to episode 13 of the BruWings and Things podcast. I'm your regular host, Kaylee, and I'm joined alongside the usual Cameron and Alex. Today, we have a very special guest. You may know him, you may not. His name is Tim Peel, and he is a former NHL referee. He has been NHL Officials Association member since 1995. He has reffed 1,362 regular season games, and he has also reffed 90 playoff games. He was a referee in the 2012 Ottawa NHL All-Star Game, and he also reffed the 2014 Sochi Olympics. He has also been a referee in the 2017 Winter Classic, which was a game with the Blackhawks and the Blues. He has also been in the 2009 Winter Classic, which was a game with the Red Wings and the Blackhawks. So without further ado, here is our very special guest, former referee Tim Peel. All right, everyone, we are here with Tim Peel. Tim, how are you today on this fine Sunday?
I'm great, Kaylee. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
I'm great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, we're all doing well. We just want to say thank you so much for coming on. We're so excited to have you here.
Oh no, of course. We've started following each other on Twitter, and I realized what a big hockey fan you are. So when you suggested it, I was like, yeah, it's a no-brainer. So plus, I loved working in Boston, and maybe you guys can explain to me the music, but is it a Celtic music that they play sometimes? You know, when they get that.
Oh yeah.
And when I would work big playoff games there, and that place would be rocking, and they would play that one or two particular songs. And I mean, it got me pumped up on the ice. I loved it. It was
Yeah.
like, I love that music.
That's
It was like so much fun.
Yeah, Shipping Up to Boston by the Dropkick Murphys is the famous song.
Is
And
that what it
Yeah.
is?
yeah, it's a famous song and there's really no like words referencing this, like it's just a extremely hype song.
I'm
And
gonna write that down.
yeah,
What's it called again?
it's Shipping Up to Boston by
Shipping
the
up to
yeah,
Boston.
by the Dropkick Murphys, and it's I'm shipping up to Boston, and then the whole crowd goes,
Oh,
"Oh!" I
yeah.
always, me and Kaylee, it's so funny you said that because we always say once that is played, it's game over for the other team. Like if it's a tie game and they play that, like they always time it at the right time when the team needs it. And it's just it's one of the
Well,
greatest things.
so I grew up in New Brunswick. I lived in Toronto when the NHL hired me, but growing up as a kid, I grew up in New Brunswick, and there's a lot of similarities from Boston to St. John, New Brunswick. It's where the immigrants came over to St. John as they did to Boston. So we have a lot of Irish people in St. John, and there was a big like a lot of St. Louis people have become, or St. John people have become friends with people in Boston. And I remember as a kid, we'd come down for vacations, and when I was in college, we'd come down and go to Fenway Park, and there was a lot of similarities there. And Boston's one of my top three favorite cities. New York, Montreal, and Boston. I always loved working there, and we usually stayed over at the Long Wharf Marriott. And just walking around downtown, it's a phenomenal city. I love working there. I loved working playoff games there. I loved working any games there, but playoffs were special because, as you know, you guys are really passionate about your sports teams, but the Bruins in particular.
Yeah.
Yeah, that actually is one of the first questions I wanted to ask you. So obviously you said Boston, New York, Montreal, some of your favorite teams and favorite arenas to officiate in, but I wanted to know also about some of your least favorite, if you have any.
Yeah, I was asked that the other day. Atlanta wasn't fun. They didn't have any fans. Basically, any place that you went, like Chicago, people forget, like the early 2000s of Chicago, we'd be working there. They had a lot of Sunday afternoon games, and there'd be 5,000 people at the Chicago Stadium. It was brutal, and it's remarkable how it's changed. But you know what? There really isn't, like, people will go, "What's Columbus like?" Columbus is a beautiful building. Like, they have a beautiful building. Raleigh, the fans are really into it. Even some of these non-traditional hockey markets. Obviously, all the Canadian cities were fun, and we have a lot of good buildings, San Jose, Minnesota, St. Louis, uh, even Florida. Florida would be fun to work, I think, right now this year, because there were many nights that we went there and it was, 5,000-6,000 people. And you should always, treat every game like every other game. But when there's a small crowd, and sometimes it's tough to get up for the game, because, you go from working in Florida back a few years ago and there'd be 5,000 fans, and then you go to Boston and the roof's coming off. Like, it's human nature that you're going to get caught up in the emotion and so on of the building. But no, I don't really have any particular buildings that I didn't like. I loved working Boston, Madison Square Garden, and Montreal. I even liked Philadelphia. The Philly fans are crazy, and but I loved working there. There was a guy there. He's still there. He's famous. He's called the Sign Guy. They've done stories on him in Philly, and he's behind the visitors net, and he's got a stack of signs. He's had season tickets for 30, 40 years. And every game he'd come out, he'd go, "Peel, you suck." He'd hold up the sign, whatever. So one night where, I was kind of known to go out a lot and party and have fun. And so I run into him. He comes up to me at this Chicky and Pete's, which is right beside all the sports buildings there in Philly. And he introduced himself, and I buy him a beer. And next thing you know, we're drinking for 3 hours and laughing and telling stories. And so I got him now on my side. And so every game after that, I'd come back and the guys would laugh in the dressing room, because I'd come out and he'd be welcome back, and I'd give him a pump like this and always point at him, and we became friends. So it's funny how because people just think, well, he's a referee, he's an asshole. He calls penalty against our team, and he cost us a game. And then when they get to know you, like that happened a lot on the road, where you get to know people and they're like, "Yeah, you're a really good guy. Like,
you're a human being."
I'm like, "Yeah, dude, it's just the jersey,
Yeah.
So that was the fun part of my sport, and meeting people and developing friendships, throughout 25 years or so.
Yeah, just like the players. I mean, you're a human being too, with a family and interests and hobbies. You're not a robot, even though some people want robot refs and umpires. So it's good to
Right.
hear that you turned some people onto your side, because you deserve it. You're a nice guy. So
Thanks.
you're just doing your job.
Yeah, exactly.
So I just wanted to know, so how did you first get into hockey when you were younger? And who was your favorite team growing up?
So I grew up in New Brunswick, just up above Boston, up above Massachusetts, and right on the east coast of Canada. I grew up in a small town of 1,000 people. We had one rink, and everybody played hockey. And back then, I'm 55, so this is back in the 60s and 70s, and everybody played hockey. And so I started caddying in the summertime at the golf course next to where I lived. And I grew up in a trailer park. I was adopted. I came from nothing, and the country club that was by the trailer park, obviously on the right side of the tracks. I was living on the wrong side of the tracks, and I went over there and started caddying and cleaning clubs and so on. And then the wintertime rolled around, and I missed having the spending money, because our family didn't have money, and so I missed having the spending money. So I started refereeing the little kids that were 6, 7, 8 years old, and kept doing it until I was in my early 20s, and that's how I first got started.
Wow.
And now I run a referee. In fact, you probably saw it today, Kaylee. Maybe you didn't, but I put it out on social media today. But I have a referee school here in St. Louis called the Tim Peel Referee Camp. It's third year for it. And we get kids flying in from all over the U.S. and California and Georgia and different places that you'd think they wouldn't come in for this camp. And it's great. And I don't know if you know the name Mike Mckenna, if you follow him on social media. Mm-hmm. So Mike Mckenna, he played pretty much in the American League, but he played a few games in the NHL. Well, his grandfather was a longtime referee here in St. Louis, and we have this foundation called the Bill Mckenna Foundation. And all the money that we raise from our referee school, none of us get paid. We make about 15 grand every camp from it, and we take that money, we put it in the Bill Mckenna Foundation, and then we hand out scholarships to young officials in the area that are pursuing their post-secondary education. Young officials in the area that are going to college, and that's what we use the money for. So it's fun. I like doing it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how did you get into the officiating side of the game, translating just from being a player and stuff like that? How did you get into officiating?
Well, like I mentioned, when I first started doing it when I was a kid, and then back in the 80s, there was a lot of teams. The Quebec League wasn't in the Maritimes yet. It wasn't in Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, or New Brunswick. And so you just said the Quebec League, which is in the province of Quebec. They weren't yet in the Maritimes. So the NHL scouts for referees just like they scout for players, and they would send out people to the Western League, the OHL, the Quebec League. Well, we never got scouted down in the Maritimes. So I was working back then in the Maritimes. They had a lot of teams in the American Hockey League. And so I was the local linesman. So, Stephen Wackham, who's now the director of officiating, he refed in the NHL for years, and Don Van Massenhoven and all these guys that I eventually worked with, they would fly in, do 2 or 3 games on the weekend. I'd be the local linesman driving around doing games. And then I had hoped to make the NHL, but I knew I wasn't going to get scouted down there. And ironically, that I was in the banking business, and the company that I worked for in New Brunswick transferred me to Toronto. And then that year, that was in 95, 96, I got into the OHL, and then things took off from there.
Oh, that's awesome. So that was just like kind of perfect timing.
Yeah, it was. And I came up and they didn't know who I was. And they gave me a break in the OHL to start refereeing. And I was fortunate enough my first year there. I went to, they told me when I started that I wouldn't work playoffs and all that. And then I had a good year, and they were like, okay, we're going to give you the first round of the playoffs, kind of as a bone. And anyway, that round went good, and they kept giving me second round, third round, and I went to the finals. So then the NHL office in Toronto is where the head office is for the officiating department. And so they know, all of a sudden there's this young kid that's working the finals in his first year in the OHL, and they're like, we need to go and see this guy. And then that's kind of when I got on their radar. And then they, brought me on, and I worked back then in the International Hockey League for a year or two before the NHL hired me.
Wow.
How was officiating against teams like the Flint Generals and stuff like that in the IHL?
It was good. Like the IHL was tough. Like, that was where all the NHLers, guys that didn't make it, guys that were too old to play in the American League, tough guys. Like, we'd have bench clearing brawls every night. It was a shit show in the IHL. And but it was a lot of fun. We're in Kalamazoo and Fort Wayne and all these small little places. And it's funny because I was working in the IHL, and I grew up in, born in Canada, and thought I would live there forever. And then after a couple of years of traveling in the US, I'm like, I really like the United States. I'm like, I need to move to the US. So I went to my boss, Andy Van Helleman, in 2001, after I'd worked for the league for 3 years, and said, I want to move to the US. And then they moved me to St. Louis. So
awesome.
Wow. That's pretty cool. Like, I never thought there's like farm teams or whatever for referees or whatever that you guys have down there. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So it's funny because there were many times, like, I worked with a lot of good guys that never made it to the NHL when I was in the IHL and the American Hockey League. And the crazy thing about our business is and it's similar to hockey teams, very similar. But we had a lot of guys. We had a lot of guys that were really good, but they were too cocky. They had bad attitudes. They didn't want to listen to the bosses. And just like in any way of life, like, it's, there would be times when a supervisor would come in, and when I was in the minors, and said, go on about the game. And I would, maybe disagree with his assessment of what happened, but I would just not, okay, well, I'll try to learn from it. And you had to play the game, and guarantee you he's leaving the room, he's going, he's right and coachable, and good attitude, and, wants to learn, and so on. and that was a lot of it. And there was a lot of guys that didn't make it because they didn't have the right attitude. So
Yeah. And when you're talking about getting selected, like, you talked about getting selected into the NHL, but what about for like, the Winter Classic or stuff like that, or just any playoff game? Like, is it just like randomized, or can teams select like,
no, it's a good question. So when it comes to when it, everyone does one all-star game, and all they do is Stephen Walker or Brian Lewis, whoever, Kerry Gregson, whoever the boss was at that time. They just go down the list in seniority. So senior guys will get it. Then next year, it's a pecking order.
okay.
So I did mine back in 2012, and then now with the Winter Classic, Stephen and when I was working them, I worked two. I worked one in 2009 at Wrigley, and then Busch Stadium in 2017, and they really select who they feel that they can trust, because it's on it's a national stage. It's on NBC, across the country in Canada, and they don't. I don't know if I've ever seen them put in. So we have 34 refs, Cam, and they take 20 guys to the playoffs. And there's a lot of guys. There's quite a few guys right now that are on staff that will probably never work a playoff game. But it's like a hockey team. You can't have 30 Wes McCaulays or 30 Kelly Sutherlands. It's just that it's not realistic. You're going to have third and fourth liners and your grinders that fill in games, and so the NHL takes the top 20 guys that they feel are working the best, the top 20 to the playoffs, and then the other 14 guys go home. And I'm pretty sure that I don't think they've ever had a guy work a Winter Classic that hasn't worked playoffs before, because it's a premier event, and they want to make sure that they've got their top guys in there. So,
And when you talk about like, the best guys and stuff, is there like you said, there's like a guy who comes in and like talks you through, like, do you guys like sit in a room on Monday and like watch tape like like a
yeah,
NFL team, or
so we've got probably 6, 8, 10 supervisors right now. Bill McCreary, the famous ref, Rob Schick, Mike Lago, that just came off the ice recently, and a few others. And they're regularly going out throughout the league and watching games in person. But as you guys have seen, you've got the War Room in Toronto. They watch every game. Stephen Walkham, the director of officiating, he watches every game. I could text him tonight and say, what game are you watching? And he knows our guys better than they know themselves. He knows who's working well, who's not working well. So then the supervisors will come in and give you an assessment. But even I never cared whether there was somebody in the building or not, because it really didn't matter, because Steven's watching the game. And then what happens is January, we get a mid-season letter, and it's telling us what we're doing well, what we need to work on, areas of improvement, and so on. And you can kind of tell in January, I think, by your mid-season evaluation, how your year is going and whether you're in line for the playoffs. And I never worked a Stanley Cup final. I worked a bunch of third rounds, but I was in the league 23 years, and other than 2 or 3 years early in my career, I worked playoffs every year, and I took a lot of pride in that, because like Keith Tkachuk's my good buddy, and he never won a Stanley Cup. It doesn't mean he wasn't a good player, right? And it's just life. And sometimes, you get a boss that likes certain guys. It's political, just like in anything. You get a new boss comes in, he likes his guys. But I always worked playoffs, and I took a lot of pride in that, because the league knew that they could trust me. And was I their top guy? No, but I knew I was in the, what I did like, I remember when Sean Thornton was playing for Boston, because I had refereed Sean back in junior hockey, and I always got along great with Sean. And he came up to me one night, and he's like, "You better not give me any penalties tonight." And I'm like, "Why is that?" And he goes, "Because I rated you as one of the top 5 refs in the league." Because ESPN would always do this ranking, and I always took pride in it. I was like high as 3. It was usually Wes. Everyone loves Wes. He's my best buddy. And
you can't do that.
Yeah.
Can't do that.
For
right?
fighting.
And Wes, Kelly Sutherland, Dan O'Halloran, Dan O'Rourke, Chris Rooney, Boston native from Southie. And you never want to be, you can never be liked by everybody in the league, but you always want to be respected. And a funny story, and we all know how things ended for me, and that happened on a Tuesday night in Nashville. And Wednesday I fly home to St. Louis, and my phone's going crazy, and I get this phone call, and it's from David Clarkson. David Clarkson played for Jersey, Toronto, Columbus, and one other team. And he hated referees. Whenever I reffed him or any of the refs, it was just, he just didn't like us and we didn't like him. And so I see this Columbus number come across my phone, and I answer it, and he goes, "Hey, Tim, it's David Clarkson." And I go, well, like for a split second, I honestly thought, he's going to say, "It looks fucking good on you. I'm glad the league did what they did." And I go, "Hey, David, how's it going?" He goes, "Good." He goes, "I just want you to know," he goes, I live in Denver now. I'm in Colorado. I'm retired, and I was skating with some ex players this morning, and we were talking about what a travesty, what they did to you. And he says, "I just want you to know," he says, "I know I wasn't easy to get along with." And he says, "But when the coaches would write down the names of the officials on the board, so we always knew who was reffing the game that night," he goes, "I always knew I had one of the best refs in the league, but I also knew I had one of the fairest refs in the league." And he goes, "I just wanted you to know that." So it meant a lot to me. And eventually, and then a few months later, he was in St. Louis for the Nationals, and we got together and had some beers. And I told him, I said, when I met him, I said, it's easy back then for your friends to call, and everyone feels sorry for you. But when somebody called that I didn't even think liked me, he didn't have my number. He got it through Marty Brodeur. He made an effort to call me. It meant a lot to me. It meant that I wasn't always liked by everybody, but I was at least respected by them, and that's all that you ever want.
Exactly. Yeah. It must be like, it must be good to hear that from, like you said, someone that doesn't like you, because the fans are probably like, "Oh, good, like he's gone. You can't, like, you can't do that," like Wes would say. But I mean, only players and refs yourselves who have actually been through it will understand that there's way more to it than just that. And I'm obviously not a referee, but I was actually, I heard when it happened that is something that refs are taught to do, like game management. So that's what I heard on my end. But again, I'm not a referee, so I can't speak on it. But from a fan perspective, of course, they're probably like, "Yeah, good, get him out of here," So
Yeah. But you know what? Everything happens for a reason, and it's funny. I put on Facebook a couple days ago that I had been approached to do public speaking, and I did my first one last Friday in St. Louis to 100 businessmen in the St. Louis area, and talked about my ups and downs of my life, and growing up in a trailer park and being adopted, and just a lot of I had a hard childhood, but it made me the person that I am today, and I had a lot of ups and downs in my career. I don't know if you remember, but I had been suspended once before. I did a tequila shot with Greg Wyshynski, and that went all over social media. That was back in 2015. And
you're a cool guy.
Yeah. And I always wanted to ask Gary and Bill, because I just talked to Bill Daly 2 weeks ago. Like, I still have a great relationship with the league, like, because of what happened. Like, I wish that the outcome had been differently? Of course, because I was retiring in 4 weeks. So my last game was April 24th in St. Louis. But I understand they had just signed on gambling partners. You can bet at games now. You can bet on games. They had to show their partners that our refs don't manage the game, and that kind of stuff doesn't go on. And what I said isn't at all what I meant, and it just came out the wrong way. But I said to somebody, I said, so this guy that approached me to speak, he goes, "I watched your clip." He says, "It's literally a 2-second audio clip." He goes, "You're going to let a 2-second audio clip ruin 23 years of a great career in Olympics and all that kind of stuff?" And so my speech was about perseverance and resiliency and the ups and downs of my life and my career, and it's really about how you come out on the other end. And I remember, a week or two into after, I had been released or early retired. My wife said to me, she goes, "You're not even like," and honest to God, like that day, I wasn't even upset. Like I wasn't even upset. I thought right away, like when, like everybody called me that day. Gretzky, I'm name dropping here, but Daryl Sutter, Lou Lamoriello, John Tortorella, Joel Quenneville. Like, I mean, my phone was on speed dial. It was the Brian Burke. Everybody was calling, and which made me feel good. And my wife said, "You're not even upset." I go, "Babe, it's how we talked for 75 years on the ice." I said, what I said came out wrong, and I got caught on the mic. And unfortunately, in the world that we live in now, in cancel culture, you say the wrong thing. And I said, like Wes McCauley said to me, he goes, let's put things in perspective here. He goes, "You didn't get charged with domestic abuse. You didn't get a DUI. You didn't use a racial slur. Some things that you may never recover from." But it was funny because I said, I think a lot of good things are going to come out of this. And Quenneville and Roenick, their message was the exact same to me. They go, Joel's exact words, he goes, "Tim," he says, "you were, you're kind of well known before, but he says, like it or not, you're really well known now." And he goes, "Just so you know, I don't know if you're watching the TV today, but you're just on the Golf Channel. You're on Fox, CNN, People Magazine. Like, you kind of went crazy. It's unbelievable how it did." And so, and I said to my wife, I said, "You know me." I said, "You know the life I've had." And I said, "I'm not going to let it." I said, "This is nothing." I said, "I'm going to have opportunities because of this." I said, "But more importantly," I said, "I've got an example to set for my son that's 9 and my daughter that's 7. I said this at my referee school last summer, because it was funny that I'm kind of going on here, and I apologize, but at the referee school, the first day last year, I brought in 2 years ago, I brought in Cam Jansen. He pumps the kids up. This year I brought in Joe Vitale because he's a St. Louis guy, and I didn't want the first night to be about me and my story and so on. So Joe came in and pumped him up, and it was like day 2 or day 3, and we're showing NHL clips on the TV and teaching them and so on. And one of the players happened to be Victor Arvidsson, and that was the guy that I called the penalty on. And one of these smart ass kids, he goes, "Mr. Peel, you know who that is, eh?" And I go, so I turned around to the classroom and I said, "Okay, do you guys want to hear the story?" And they go, yeah, we want to hear the story. So I tell them the story, and I said to them, because they're 14 to 21 years old, I go, "Life's pretty good right now." I said, "Probably got a girlfriend." I said, "Mom and Dad probably bought you a car. You're in high school." I said, "Life's good." But I said, "Life's going to suck sometimes, and you're going to get kicked in the balls." But I said, "It's how you come out on the other end of it." And I had one of the mothers come up to me the last day of the camp, and she's like, "My son loves you. I wish your camp was longer. The life lessons you're teaching him." And that's what I said to my wife about Bronson and Brielle. I go, "I got a lesson, an example to set for them." It wasn't always easy. I'm making it sound like it wasn't a big deal, but my first few days that I had to go out into public here in St. Louis, not being arrogant, but people know me in St. Louis and heavily involved in the hockey community. And I had a little anxiety walking in the rinks and walking over to the golf course that I'm a member at. And, everyone's looking at me, but I had to hold my head high and not let people think that it was affecting me. And so that afternoon, I'm driving my daughter to horseback riding, and she's 7 years old, and she goes, "Dad, can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah, baby girl, what's up?" What? And she goes, "Can you do me a favor?" I go, "Yeah." She goes, "Can you tell people that you weren't fired by the NHL? I'm like, take the knife out of my heart.
That's an average 7-year-old coming at you like that.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's a little bit of what happened that day with me and the whole situation. But it's funny now, like, and Kaylee, I don't even think you were going to ask me about it. But honestly, it's not a big deal. Like, I was on with Kiprios the other night and Sportsnet and Toronto and TSN, and nobody even asked me about it now. All they want to talk about is officiating and rules and calls and so on, because it really is old news. And at the end of the day, people forget, so.
Yeah, well, good for you. First of all, I absolutely love that attitude because you're not going to get anywhere in life if you just let things like that beat you down. And like you said, people that know the real you, know your integrity, like you said, people are texting you. It was just a blunder and it
Yeah,
happens. And
yeah,
honestly, things blow over too. Like when you followed me on social media, I didn't think, oh, that's the guy that did that. I was like, oh,
yeah,
I was like, Tim followed me. That's awesome. Like it wasn't anything like it wasn't like, oh, not this guy. Like it's
yeah.
just, like you said, things blow over and people forget. And there, trust me, when I say the NHL has way bigger issues than what happened with Tim Peel
I know.
in that game. So compared to some things, and like you said, you didn't say a slur, you didn't say anything that's gonna stick with you or damage
Correct.
your image for the rest of your life. So I love it. You seem happy, and like you said, you have your family and your camp, so you're keeping busy, and I respect it a lot. I commend you. So I
Thank
absolutely
you.
love to hear that
I
from you.
appreciate that.
So, I actually wanted to know, like, what kind of training and conditioning goes on for officials, like before preseason, like with NHL players, they have the training camp and all that in preseason. Do you guys go through the same thing, like mentally,
Yeah,
physically? What do you have to do?
yeah, we do. Our fitness testing is very similar to the players. You see our officials. I would joke because I was 55 when I retired, and I'm working with a lot of kids that are mid 20s, late 20s, early 30s, and I'm looking at them and I would joke, I go, like, did you guys, were you like modeling at Abercrombie and Finch today? Like these guys are just ripped, eh? Like I mean ripped, and they're, as soon as the game would end, they'd always know they'd get the old guy a beer, and then I look over and they're making their shakes up and so on. And these guys are in incredible shape now. It's unbelievable, but you have to be, and even for me, like I was 55 and I'm on the ice with Connor McDavid. I physically could not skate as fast as him, and I would have to use my experience to read the play and make sure I stayed out of the way. But no, getting back to the NHL, we don't hear from them all summer. They leave us alone, and they have one condition: you show up at training camp in shape. And it was a long time ago. Like, I mean, this was back in the 90s. Mick Magoo, rest his soul, he passed away a couple years ago, and he failed the fitness test, and they sent him down to the East Coast Lake for a week or two. And it was an embarrassment to him. And unlike baseball or football officials, our guys, you don't see anybody out there with a drum. So we have a fitness we have a fitness guy, Dave Smith, that used to be the trainer for the New York Rangers and Florida Panthers. He's been with us for over 20 years, and he'll put a program in place. But I think most of our guys do their own thing, and they know. I always knew what I needed to do to get ready for the season, whether it was cardio or whatever. So we come to camp and we do the Vo2 test on the bike. We do the sprint tests. We do, we're sprinting. We do the old sit-ups, push-ups. But this Vo2 test is where you ride this bike, and you wear a heart monitor, and you're maxing out. And then after you finish, they see where your heart drops to, and how quickly it comes down, and that kind of, a lot of that's way over my head, but it determines whether you're in shape or not. But no, our guys take it serious every day on the road, day a game. I would have breakfast with the guys in the morning, and then all of us at some point in time would be in the gym that morning, working out, getting a good sweat on, day a game. Days off, same thing. Guys want to go and have a good workout and stay in good shape, because the lightest we ever are is the day we weigh in and we go to training camp, because then for the next 8 months you're eating hotel food, you're traveling, you're eating airport food. You really have to be disciplined, and because it's easy to put on weight. But our game is so fast now that I always looked at it like, wow, I'm getting a good workout in here tonight, 2.5 hours out in the ice, and we don't get any breaks, so we're not sitting on the bench, so yeah. But to your question, our guys are in great shape, and it's a requirement that our guys take a lot of pride in.
Wow, yeah, that's crazy. And like you said, Connor McDavid, I can't imagine having to get out of the way when he's skating by you because you do see refs, they get in the way and they trip and they're jumping into the bench. And if Connor came by me, I'd be like, "Go ahead, dude,
I know.
You just
just
see
go. I don't care."
you just see a flash of lightning. I don't even know how you see if he gets like hooked or anything. I would just be like,
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the game is so fast now. Like, I used this analogy the other day that when I first came in the league in the late 80s and or 90s and early 2000s, that the third and fourth liners were, Sean Thornton's, Reed Lowe here in St. Louis, Aaron Downey in Detroit, these muckers and grinders that were the third and fourth liners. I used this the other day, a comparison, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Their fourth liners, I guarantee you, are better skaters than probably Jonathan Tavares. Jonathan Tavares isn't a great skater, but he's such a smart player and such a intelligent player. But the point is that these third and fourth liners now can skate just as good as the first liners. The only difference is the skill set. And you see it on every team, the Bruins or whoever it is. These guys on the fourth and third lines can skate just as well as the guys on the first and second lines.
Yeah, it's crazy how the game is evolving. Like you just said, like even when I was younger, like Sean Thornton was on the fourth line, like Danny Paille was the Bruins fourth liner. Like it was just those like big grinders who got out there and added the physicality. But now the fourth liners could really be taken as like second liners just because of the
Right.
speed and everyone's smaller and faster now. So yeah, I totally agree with you with that. But I've been dying to ask this question. What is the best or funniest chirp that was either directed at you or that you've heard between players? Like, what's something that's super memorable that you just can't forget?
Well, there was a couple. Sean Avery, you guys all know Sean Avery.
yeah.
Of
And,
course.
and I had reffed him since junior hockey. So Sean and I always got along well together. And he came up to me one night at Madison Square Garden. He's like, "Hey, Pilsy, how am I playing?" I go, "Hey, you're playing." He'd always look for my reinforcement. I go, "Hey, you're playing really good, man. Like, you look good out here." He goes, "Thanks, thanks." And a couple shifts later, he comes up. He's like, "Hey," "What are you doing after the game?" I said, "I'm probably just going back to the hotel, with the guys." He's like, "Well," he says, "I'm hanging out with the Olsen twins." He says, "Why don't you meet the Olsen twins from Full House?" And he was like, "I'm hanging out with the Olsen twins." He goes, "Why don't you come?" And I really wanted to, but I'm like, I'd already been a shit enough in my career with the league, and I'm like, I'm gonna go and that Cindy Adams, that famous gossip columnist on page 6 in the New York Post, she's gonna have pictures of me and Avery and the Olsen twins. So, and then one night there was this player, Tyler Kennedy, played for Pittsburgh,
Mhm.
and we're in Madison Square Garden, and Avery keeps calling him Pig Nose. "Hey, Pig Nose. Hey, Pig Nose. What's going on, Pig Nose?" And I'm like, "Pig Nose? Like," well, and I said, "Sean, why are you calling him Pig Nose? I don't get it." He goes, "Look at his nose. He's got it." And he did. He had a pig nose. He had, and he goes, and it's like, where do you even come up with this stuff? Like, and, and then I remember Chris Simon was really tough, and he was playing for Minnesota, and I think Carolina. It was a home game for Minnesota, and a Carolina player did something to one of the star players on Minnesota. I think it was Koivu or Suter or Parise, and Chris Simon came in and he said to the guy, he goes, "Dude, what are you doing?" He goes, "I'm just sending him a message. I'm sending him a message." And Simon goes, "Well, consider me his secretary and all messages go through me." And I love that line. I thought
That's
that was
good.
a great line.
I
That's
like that.
incredible.
Consider me his secretary and all messages come through me.
That's good.
That's incredible. I love that.
Amazing. So you were talking about obviously the physical conditioning coming into each season. How many games do officials end up playing each season or refereeing in
Yeah,
each
so we're
season?
contracted for 74. We do 74 a year. Sometimes if we have injuries, uh, right now we've got, I think, 3 or 4 guys out. Francis Sharon, who worked the finals last year, he had season-ending ankle surgery. back in October, so he's done for the year. A few other guys are out with meniscus and knee problems. And so, but usually 74, you may do 75, 76, 77. Then you do approximately 5 or 6 preseason games and then playoffs, whether you get selected for playoffs or not. So
when you come in
over 80 games.
Okay. So when you come into camp, every couple of years we see like a memo from the NHL or whatever saying that they want to crack down on certain penalties. This year they put an emphasis on cross checks being the one that they want to crack down on. When you come into camp, is there, do they talk to you about that? Do they say, hey, we're wanting to put an emphasis on this year, like let's make sure we tighten it up, or what do they say?
Yeah, big time. So we're at camp, and Stephen Walkham, who's the director of officiating, does a great job. We're there in this big classroom. We've been going to Buffalo for the last probably 10 years. The Marriott is hooked on to the practice facility where the Sabres play, and it's a great setup for us. And so we'll be in the classroom, and we watch a lot of video at camp, and the cross-checking crackdown, I think our guys have done a good job of implementing it this year. I don't know if it was becoming a big problem, but one that really stuck out in the playoffs last year was when Scott Mayfield, is it Scott Mayfield? Yeah, Mayfield from the Islanders cross-checked Kucherov, and the game was in New York at Long Island. I don't know if you remember that. It hurt. Like, it was a vicious cross-check, and the ref was standing there, and he didn't call it. So I think the league, every summer, the league will get together with the Players Association, the competition committee, and they'll, even though things are going well, they'll always get together and say, hey, where are some things we can improve on? And I remember, 3-4 years ago, it might not have been made public, but internally we're like, hey, we got to clamp down on slashing. Guys are getting their fingers broken, and all of a sudden maybe people are wondering, why are the refs calling all these slashing penalties all of a sudden? It was because we're instructed to, hey, let's clamp down on slashing. So every year they'll get together and look at it. But a funny story going back to you asked me how many games that we do. And so in 2004, we were locked out for the entire year. And Keith Kachuk and I are good buddies here in St. Louis. And so we didn't have anything to do for the entire year. So we meet at this local bar all the time and drink every day, and just a bunch of losers, and so I'm going, whoa me one day. I'm like, Walt, I go, I do 5 home games a year in St. Louis. I said, you have 41 home games. I said, so that's 36 more games you have at home. I said, multiply by 2, because I fly out the night before. So I said, I'm on the road 72 more nights a year than you are. And he takes a drink of his beer and sets it down. He looks at me, he goes, well, I guess you should have been a better player. And I'm like, yeah, then I wouldn't be, yeah, exactly. Then I wouldn't be complaining. So
he wasn't beating around the bush with that one, I guess.
No, Walt doesn't beat around the bush.
Doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, I know you were talking about how the cross check it wasn't called or anything, but I had a question about the situation room or whatever in Toronto. When you guys go and get the little iPad and the headphones, is it like a back and forth between you two, or is it just you're literally just listening to what Toronto says? And has there ever been a goaltender interference or something where you were like, I don't think that was interference, and the Toronto's like, yeah, that was, and then you just have to accept it?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It is back and forth. We get on the headset, and then we're talking to either Chris King, Coley, Rod Pasma, Kay Whitmore, and then we now have a ex-referee in the war room too. It's usually Bill McCreary, Don Van Massenhoven, and a couple others, and they'll give their input too. But we'll go back and forth on what we think is the right call. And I got in trouble a couple of years ago. It was more than a couple, but there was a play in Toronto, and I didn't think that it was goalie interference, and Chris King was like adamant that it was. And back then they changed it where we had the final call, and now it's, I don't know if it's anything's written in the manual, but it's pretty much it's got to be a collaboration and an agreement with all parties of which way we're going to go here. And but anyway, I said to Chris, I said no, I said this isn't goal interference, and I called it a goal, and so they weren't happy with me that night no more. But no, they do a good job. They're like, that's not an easy job, because you're gonna piss off 50% of the people. You're gonna, like, they had that play the other night with Austin Matthews where he kicked it in. Yeah. And then they were showing a goal in Carolina that was similar to that. That was, I think it was Carolina, that looked very similar. Our sport is not black and white. Like, there's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of feel and the Austin Matthews one, they made the right call. He kicked it in, but a lot of fans don't realize now they changed the rule 2 or 3 years ago where you can direct it in now with your skate. You can direct it in. You just can't kick it in. And a lot of fans don't understand that. So
yeah, even though your jerseys are black and white, the game is not.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it, Cam.
He's so corny.
Sorry. If you saw me smile halfway through that when you said that, I had to. I make them disappointed in me at least once an episode for saying some stupid bad joke.
Last episode, he goes, "Be an ass set, not an ass hat," and I guess he came up with that.
Yeah.
So that's like his new thing. Like,
I gotta get a shirt. Made of that. Well,
I thought you were Patrice Bergeron when we came on here. You look just like him, a younger Patrice Bergeron.
Oh God!
You should use that line like when you go in the bars in Boston. Say you're Patrice Bergeron.
Honestly, if I get someone drunk enough, they might actually believe me. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny he says that though, because we did our ancestry DNA and our ancestors are mostly French Canadian. We're mostly and I was going through my DNA profile and it shows distant relatives, and I actually had a lot of Bergerons in my distant family. So
that's hilarious.
That's where it comes from.
All I'm saying is wear the locker room tickets from Bergeron right now.
That is funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Allard is French, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I guess it's French for fat, probably. Allard.
Yeah.
Stop. You're done.
Okay.
I'm cutting your mic.
I need a drum set over here.
I'm cutting your mic off. So I actually just had 2 final questions for you here. So I really want to ask this one because this is something I'm always interested in, and I love fighting in hockey. But do you personally feel like fighting should always be a part of hockey no matter what? Because if the NHL were to ever stray away from it, I would be completely devastated.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kaylee, and I watched McDermott and Reeves the other night. It was fun to watch. Two big boys, 2 heavyweights. I have mixed feelings on it now, and it's kind of surprises myself because I am very old school, and I loved the era that I came up in hockey in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, and you guys are old enough to remember the Flyers when they had the Legion of Doom line with Leclerc and Renberg and Lindros, and hockey was tough back then. There's, unfortunately, our game is so good now and our game is so fast, but there are some nights where there's not even a body check thrown, and we see it with Jacob Trouba the other day where he had to fight twice because he hit McKinnon and the kid from Chicago. And because now it's a big deal when someone steps up and throws a big hit, but that happened every game, So the only concern I have, and I hate even bringing it up because I hope it never happens, but is when a player loses his helmet, and I'm always concerned that are we going to get, because it would be such a black eye for our sport if here we are, the only league in the world that accepts and condones fighting, we allow it, and then somebody gets seriously hurt and they hit their head on the ice, and God forbid they die, they're in a coma. So I don't think it's as big a I don't think it changes the momentum of the game as much as maybe it did years ago. I think when a fight happens now, most of the players are like, okay, it's over with. Let's go back and play. Like, I really don't think it changes a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I still like a good fight, but it's my only concern, Kaylee, is that if anybody ever got seriously hurt, because we are living in a different world now in 2022 than we were in 1992, and where it wouldn't be as big an issue. But if that happened now, like, our sport is not going to be looked very well by people around the world in our society, because they're like, you guys, what did you expect was going to happen? You guys accept this. You guys allow fights to happen. And did you not think anybody was going to get seriously hurt? So it's a tough one, and I don't know, what do you think? Do you agree with a bit of what I'm saying, or do you just disagree? Like, what's your mindset on it?
Yeah, I mean, I love the fighting. Obviously, it's not just for entertainment purposes, but like you said, old school. Like, if you do something and a guy doesn't like it, you have to answer the bell. Like, it's
Right.
such a tough sport. So, like, when Tom Wilson takes Panarin's head and shoves it into the ice, Tom Wilson should get beat up for that.
I
So,
agree.
like, it kind of just condones those headhunters and, I'll say it, dirty players to just kind
Yeah.
of run rampant and do whatever they're doing. But if they start cracking down as a whole, like, if you do this, there's a game misconduct. Like, if Tom
Right.
Wilson pulls a Tom Wilson and headshots someone, you're done. Game misconduct, which that's usually how it goes, hopefully. But I guess we are trending more towards that way with the league becoming, smaller but faster players, and it's more flashy instead of gritty and tough.
Right.
So I feel like the NHL themselves won't rule it out, but I think we just might evolve and stray away from it, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like,
No,
eventually
that's
a fight will be very rare. But it is good to see how considerate NHL players usually are. Like, I know Chara fought the other night, and I can't remember who it was, but he was making sure he was okay. He's like, "Are you
yeah.
okay? Are you okay?" So
Yeah.
he,
Yeah.
like, there, I have seen that NHL players are, even though they're very tough, they are very considerate. At least
They
most of
are.
them are. Like, they don't want a guy to hit his head, or they'll lift their jersey up if they see them going into the boards. That just happened the other night, I saw.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So I
saw
think
that.
we're gonna trend away from it.
Yeah, Getzlaff did that. He held the guy's jersey.
Yes, Getzlaff.
Yeah.
Thank
But
you.
it's a good point about Panarin and Wilson, because you are right about that, because Ryan Reeves being on that team this year, nobody's talked about the Rangers getting pushed around this year. Nobody has. There hasn't been any liberties taken on Panarin, Zabinajad, any of their star players. So it does. I guarantee. I said it the other day just to a friend. I said, I guarantee you, Ryan Reeves is the most well-liked person by Panarin, Zabinajad, Lafreniere. Like, they're like, hey, this guy's giving us a lot of space out here. He's given us we're in a comfort zone where we don't have to worry about Tom Wilson coming at us, because we know Ryan Reeves is going to come. So, it is an aspect that probably still, and that's kind of what you're getting at, still probably needs to be part of our game, just to keep players honest.
Hmm. Yeah,
That's great.
it's not even like, oh, I want to see someone get hurt and beat up. It's like,
Right.
there was a Bruins Canucks game recently, and they would not leave Patrice Bergeron alone. And
I saw that.
you do not let someone
I know. I was
touch
upset
the
about it.
angel.
They wouldn't
You
leave me
do
alone.
not let you do not let someone touch the angel that is Patrice Bergeron, my beloved captain. Like, they were
Correct.
messing with him, and nobody got beat up for it.
I
And
know.
my dad is a real, like, old school rock'em sock'em hockey guy, and he's like, somebody kill him, like, for touching Bergeron. So, like, but Bergeron is fighting his own battles, and you got all these guys just kind of standing there, and I'm like, do
Yeah.
something. This cannot continue to happen. He's your captain. So,
Was
like,
was Trent Frederick in the lineup that night? Do you know?
I do not think he was,
Because
but
I'd be
he
surprised,
is.
because I know Trent. I've known Trent since he's like 6 years old, because he grew up here in St. Louis. His dad and I are good friends, and
Mm-hmm.
you know what the role he'll play. And I'd be surprised if he wasn't in the lineup, or if he was in the lineup, it would shock me that he wouldn't do something.
Yeah.
But you're right. A few years ago, when Pittsburgh traded for Ryan Reeves at the trade deadline, it was because Sid was getting abused, and they were taking liberties on him, and so those players do have a role, and they can play now. Ryan Reeves can play. He scored 2 goals the other night.
Yeah.
But they can play. You can't play in this league anymore if you can't skate.
Yeah.
And the old days of a Derek Bugard or John Scott, those guys, you can't have a guy on the bench that can only play 3 minutes a night, because it's just a wasted spot on your roster. So any of these tough guys now, they can play hockey too, and they probably were probably good junior hockey players.
Right.
Yeah, and speaking of Trent Frederick, I'm sure the fans in Boston love him because, the big bad Bruins, when they had Lucic, who's my all-time favorite player, and Thornton, one of my favorite hockey moments of all time is when Matt Cook took the cheap headshot on Mark Savard, and the next time the Bruins played the Penguins, the second Thornton stepped out on the ice with Matt Cook, the gloves just flew off, and the crowd went, I get chills thinking about it, because it was such a redemption moment, because he seriously injured Mark Savard, and Thornton's like, no, you don't get away with that, and he beat the crap out of Matt Cook, and that, it was electric.
I was doing that game when Matt Cook blindsided Savard. It was in Pittsburgh, actually.
Wow.
You were officiating that game?
I was officiating that game. And
wow, I didn't know that.
And Chris King called me because headshots really hadn't come into the NHL yet. And until we really got educated on those plays, because as an official, when he hit Savard, it was so late that the puck was long gone. So as a ref, you then take your focus shifts to where the puck's going and what's going to happen down here. And Mark Joannette, who is a really good referee and worked many Stanley Cup finals, him and I were doing that game, and we didn't see it because it happened so late. And Chris King, who's the vice president of the NHL, called me the next day. He's like, hey, we're heading down to Florida for the GM meetings. What do you think about this play? And we're talking about bringing in a penalty for headshots. And I said, yeah, we need it in our league, because that was, it probably, I know Mark very well. I reffed him in junior, and I got to know him better here when he was coaching with the Blues, and it probably ended his career. He continued to play, but he had major head problems after that, and it was primarily from that one hit. So we've done a good job of taking that out. But yeah, that was pretty vicious. And yeah, I was working that game. It was in Pittsburgh.
Wow, I did not know that. But yeah, that was such a pivotal and upsetting moment for the Bruins and Bruins fans. I absolutely love Savard. He's one of my first favorite players when I was younger. So, and he seems like such a great guy, but hopefully hopefully today he's getting away from those symptoms and kind of living a normal, happy life, because it does affect people very negatively. So,
but you're right, Kaylee. I guarantee you, the anticipation leading up to that game that day, or 2 days prior to back when they were in Boston, that would have been what everyone was taught. People would have been, there wasn't anybody getting there late for that game. They were like, this is going to be awesome tonight. And it just gave me chills, because you're right. Sean went out there and he's like, I'm going to take care of business. And that's why he was loved by his teammates and loved by the city of Boston, because of the type of player that he was, that he would do anything to stick up for his teammates.
Yeah, and it's the same thing after the Tom Wilson and Panarin incident. I do not know one hockey fan that didn't watch that Rangers Capitals game after that happened.
I know.
And they, right off the face-off, everyone grabbed a dance partner, and I was like, I love it. I love it.
That was fun to watch. I agree.
Yeah.
Was what, 180 minutes of penalties or something that game?
Yeah, it was incredible. So, moving on, my last question for you is I just wanted to ask what your most memorable game ever was officiating. Just something that will stick with you forever that you absolutely love to tell the story about.
Probably a couple. One was actually I whenever you get selected to work a game seven, um, it's really an honor because they're putting you in because it's the most important game of the series. Obviously, it's a deciding game, and they've got enough trust in you that you're gonna do a good job in game seven. And so I did a couple. I did one in Pittsburgh with Montreal and Pittsburgh. And then the one that I loved doing was it was in Boston, and it was Boston and Montreal. And obviously the rivalry those two teams have had over the years, and to be selected to work game seven in Boston and that was fun. And I think Boston won that game. I think they won that series, but probably, a couple games like that. And then when I was fortunate enough to be selected to work the Olympics, and there were a lot of good officials over there. The NHL took over 7 officials, and then we were paired up with European officials. And I was selected to work the bronze medal game between Finland and the United States. And it's a great story because Teemu Selanne, it was going to be his last Olympics, and I don't know if he had ever won a medal at the Olympics, but this was like his gold medal, for Finland to get a bronze medal, and to get a medal at all at the Olympics was going to be a tremendous feat. So I called 2 penalty shots in USA's favor in the first period, and they were easy calls. Patrick Kane was on a breakaway, guy slashes, stick breaks it, and I forget the other one, trip. And so Teemu comes over, and I had reffed him for his entire career in Anaheim, and he came over, and I mean, it's the maddest I've ever seen a player at me. Like I honestly at one point thought he's going to take his stick and bust it over my head. Like I thought he was that mad. And if it was an NHL game, I would have given him unsportsmanlike. I would have given him a 10, maybe even kicked him out. But I knew I had to take it. I had, he's the leader of the team. He's an icon in Finland. And I knew I had to suck it up. I had to take every piece of shit that he was throwing at me and just swallow it. And I had to take it. Games on national TV. It's a bronze medal game. And so Finland came back and won the game, and we were in the Olympic Village, and the refs, the hotel we stayed at in Russia, was really the only bar that was really open at nighttime. And of course, that's where the refs would hang out, and we'd be there every night, and we just had a blast. And so it's like 2 a.m, and because we would sit up and drink in Russia till 5, 6 a.m, and all of a sudden here comes the whole Finnish team coming in the bar, and Jarmo Kekalainen, I've known him forever, and one of my favorite players ever was Kimmo Timonen, the small defenseman, just a tremendous human being, a great person, and him and I just loved each other. And so they come right over, and Peelsy, and they got the bronze medal on. And now Teemu comes over, and he's hugging me, and I'm like, you are such a front runner. I said, you are the biggest front runner I know. I said, you wanted to kill me, Howard. No, I love you. And we drank till literally 6 a.m, and the whole team and the refs, and we had a blast. So, being a kid from New Brunswick, and where, the upbringing that I have had and what I came from, I've got pictures downstairs of Derek Amell and Brad Kovacic, 2 of my close friends on staff that are linesmen, in front of the Olympic flame, and going like, is this really happening? Like, this is a kid from nothing and grew up, small town of 1,000 people. Now I'm at the Olympics. And so that would probably be the pinnacle of my career, was being chosen to work that. And I feel really bad. I was talking to Wes couple days ago, because he didn't tell me that he was chosen, but I guarantee you he would have been going over to Beijing you know, the last two Olympics, Gordie Dwyer, good referee, and Francis Sharon and Dan O'Rourke and all these good refs that haven't had an opportunity to work the Olympics. Just like the players, it's you know, something that they look forward to, but it's something that, you know, it's just another thing to add to your career that you look back on. And you know, that trip to Russia is a memory that we still talk, guys, that, you know, that was 8 years ago, and we still talk about it all the time. And so it's unfortunate that they're not, you know, they're missing out on this opportunity right now too. But no, to answer your question, Kelly, you know, games like that, any playoff games, I love the playoffs. You know, the energy in the building. The energy in the building in a playoff game is completely different from a regular season game. And it's amazing. It always amazes me how these athletes can bring it from here to here in the playoffs. It's unbelievable. Guys that have never thrown a check all year are throwing checks, you know, and how they're able to bring that level of intensity is unbelievable, and it's a credit to them. So
Yeah,
I gotta ask you, were you guys sour when the Blues beat you guys?
So I
No more
actually,
questions, please. Okay, we're ending it.
well, it's funny you say that because I wanted to throw this question in there, but I was like, all right, so I have such PTSD. I don't know if you remember when Noel Achari was blatantly tripped in game 6 of that game, and there was a no call, and then the Blues won the game, and then it sent game 7 back to Boston, and then they lost.
No,
So,
that was game 5 in Boston. So that
oh, game
Achari
5.
played, yeah, it was in
Yes,
Boston.
game 5.
Yeah, and Kelly Sutherland, who is a great ref. Him and Wes are our two best guys. He was standing there and he missed it. And Steve Kazari, who's a good ref, he works the finals. They just missed it, and it sucks, you know. But stuff just happens, and I could tell. I was watching that game because you're right. It was a big break, you know, and I could tell by Kelly, because Kelly you can see Kelly in the picture because it happened on the sidewall just inside the Blues bench, right at the hash marks there. And Kelly Sutherland is down in the corner between the corner and the net. He's down in that area. And after the goal went in, you can see Kelly skating by Achari and going up the boards. And I could just tell by his body language, he was like, fuck, like there is not a worse feeling in the world than missing that call. And fans don't understand. They really, I'm sure some do, but I don't think most of them understand. If I guarantee you, Kelly went back to his hotel room. He got shit-faced that night. I know Kelly. And he would have been upset about that for 2 or 3 days. And it's the same thing, but it's funny. Every team faces adversity. When St. Louis played San Jose earlier in that playoffs, I was a standby ref in St. Louis, and that was when Timo Meier gloved the puck to San Jose teammate, and they put it in the net, and that was the game. That was overtime. Like, that was the game over. At least the Boston game, like, they still had time to, but the play in St. Louis literally ended with an illegal play. And it was Mark Jonette, Dan O'Rourke, Johnny Murray, all Stanley Cup final guys, and Matt McPherson, who now works the finals, and they missed it. And they came in the room, and now the NHL has done a good job where we can review those plays. We can review when a goal is scored. Was it high sticked by a teammate? I'm not talking a high stick at the net. Was there a glove pass or a high stick earlier in the sequence that team kept possession, and then the puck went in the net, and then we can look at that and take the goal away. And so this play in St. Louis, it made no sense. Like, from China to the US, everybody could see that he gloved the pass. All the coaches could see that, all the players could see, all the fans could see, everybody on TV could see, except the 4 officials on the ice. It made no sense. And so when those guys came in the room, and Mark Jonette being the senior referee, he goes, Peelsy, what happened? And I go, Meyer gloved it. And he just shakes his head and they sit down and it's dead silence for an hour after the room. And that's how much our guys care. Like it's not like, let's go back to the hotel and drink some beer. It's not like that. Our guys take a lot of pride. Like people I see, social media and, people don't think that, that we care and that we have a lot of pride and we don't want that to happen. And so now we can review high sticks. The worst feeling was if you call the high stick and then the coach is going, it was his own player that got him, and you've just called a 4-minute penalty because the guy's cut, and then you find out 30 seconds into the power play that it was actually you literally want to dig a hole in the ice and crawl under it because it's a terrible feeling. So yeah, you know what, it's every team has to face those adversities, and that was one that went St. Louis's way. But they go to Game 7, and the Blues would be the first. You talk to O'Reilly and any of those guys, they'd be the first ones to tell you, if it wasn't for Binnington in the first period, they're not winning Game 7. That first period should have been 3-0. It easily could have been 2-0. It easily could have been 2-0. And then the Blues score, and then I love Marchand, but he makes a bad line change, and Petro goes in and scores the second goal, and right at the end of the period, sorry, Kaylee, and I guarantee you, because the Bruins had dominated that period. They had dominated that period.
Yep.
And I guarantee you, they went in and sat in the dressing room, sat in their seats, and I guarantee you, they looked at each other and go, "What the fuck just happened here? Like, we're down 2-0. We should be up 2-0." So that Blues team, it's something that you'll probably never see again, where January 1st, they're last in the NHL. Mm-hmm. And it was just something magical about that season, and the whole Gloria song and just everything that they just felt like, we lose, we'll win the next game. It was a resilient team. But
yeah. I don't blame the Blues or the Bruins or the refs or anything. I just blame the hockey gods for that win. I just chuck it up to it made a better story that the Blues would do that and blah blah blah. So that's what I chalked that up to.
I agree.
Yeah. It's crazy that, like you said, they went from the worst team. That's like this year. Imagine seeing the Canadians win this year.
Right.
Like
right.
That ain't happening.
Exactly. That's exactly what it's like. It was unbelievable. And they get a goalie in Jordan Binnington who he wasn't even their guy that they were going to bring up from the minor leagues, but their guy that they were going to bring up, I think, was Ville Husso at the time. Ville was hurt. So they brought up Binnington, and then look what happens. It's like, that's a great thing about our sport, and how a guy that wasn't even on the radar is all of a sudden now a Stanley Cup champion. He was playing in East Coast League a couple of years ago, and just goes to show all you need is a chance, and some people are made for that moment where they can seize that opportunity. And I'm not a big fan of Binnington, I'll be honest. I don't like his body language. I don't like how he pretends like he's this tough guy and so on. But when it's a big game, he rises to the occasion. So
yeah, anything could happen, just like the Maple Leafs getting beat by a Zamboni driver, emergency goalie.
Right,
so.
Exactly.
It's greatest sport in the world.
I agree.
So yeah, Tim, that's actually all we have for you today. So I just wanted to thank you so much for taking the time to come on. I know it's Sunday evening and there's football on, so I really appreciate you taking the time. This was so much fun. I think Cameron and Alex can agree. We had a blast talking with you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Cam and Alex and Kaylee. Thank you for reaching out. And good luck with school, guys. And I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Enjoy your night.
Thank you, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.